Inside a frozen rail yard, 13 German shepherds lay bound in a sealed steel car, muzzles taped, oxygen thinning with every passing minute. No alarm sounded, no records matched. They were meant to disappear as cargo. But in the blizzard, a trained K9 stopped cold, ears up, body locked on something wrong beneath the ice and steel. His handler recognized the warning instantly. What he uncovered would expose a hidden pipeline of cruelty and force one former Navy SEAL to choose between protocol and 13 lives. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, subscribe for more stories of courage, loyalty, and second chances. Winter had locked its jaws around Iron Hollow, a rail city crouched along the frozen spine of the upper Midwest. By midnight, the storm had erased color and distance alike. Streets swallowed by white, sodium lamps reduced to dull halos, the world narrowed to wind, metal, and breath. At the edge of town, Iron Hollow rail yard endured the blizzard with stubborn industry. Freight still moved, steel still waited. But everything ran at bare minimum, just enough to keep the tracks from freezing solid and the yard from dying altogether. Cole Ryder moved through the yard with a clipboard tucked under one arm, shoulders squared against the wind. He was young for a former Navy SEAL, early 30s, but carried himself with the quiet economy of someone shaped by years of discipline. Tall, lean, and compactly built, he wore a heavy canvas work jacket over thermal layers, gloves scarred by labor, boots planted with deliberate care on ice-slick gravel. His face was clean-shaven, jaw set, dark hair trimmed short enough to ignore the wind. His eyes, steady, observant, missed very little. Tonight, Cole wasn't a soldier. He was a support hand on the night shift, helping with pallet moves, inventory checks, and SEAL inspections under the yard's internal security protocol. It was honest work, quiet work. Work that kept his hands busy and his thoughts from drifting too far backward. Beside him moved Rook. The German shepherd padded through the snow with measured steps, black and tan coat dusted white along the spine, breath puffing in soft clouds. He was large even for the breed, muscular without bulk, his movements controlled and deliberate. His amber eyes stayed alert, scanning the dark lines between freight cars, reading the yard the way others read a map. Rook wore no vest tonight, only a thick collar and a short lid clipped to Cole's belt. They'd fallen into a routine over the past months. Cole checking SEALs, Rook accompanying him as both company and precaution. It was never formalized as K9 work. The rail yard had no such program, but Rook had been trained once, long before Cole adopted him, and some instincts never dulled. The wind howled harder as they passed a line of refrigerated freight cars, their steel sides rimmed with ice. Cole checked his list, scanned a barcode, tapped a note into his handheld. Everything matched, until Rook slowed. It wasn't abrupt, just a change in rhythm. Rook's nose dropped toward the snow-packed gravel, his tail lowered, his ears angled forward, rigid. Step by step, he moved closer to one specific car, breath shallow now, muscles tight beneath his coat. Then he stopped, planted. Rook stood frozen before a sealed, refrigerated car, his body angled slightly sideways, head tilted, as if listening to something buried beneath steel and frost. Cole felt it immediately. The shift in the air, the subtle tension that had nothing to do with weather. "Rook," he said quietly. The dog didn't look back. This wasn't obedience refusal. This wasn't distraction. Cole had seen this posture before, years ago, on different dogs in different places, when something was wrong and a way commands couldn't override. Cole crouched, gloved hand resting lightly on Rook's shoulder. The muscles beneath were hard as cable. "What is it, boy?" Rook's breath fogged faster. A low sound vibrated in his chest. Not a growl, not a whine. Something in between. Cole stood and turned his attention to the freight car. He didn't pry. Not yet. The SEAL tag was intact at first glance, but closer inspection told a different story. The barcode sticker overlapped another, edges not aligned. The locking strip bore faint smears where adhesive had been reapplied. At the corner of the seal housing, a translucent sheen caught the light. Fresh glue, barely frozen. Cole checked the car number against his clipboard. Then the digital log. The entry existed, but it was wrong. Timestamp off by hours. Origin listed twice, once scratched out in the system with no explanation. He keyed his radio. Night Control, this is Ryder on West Refrigeration Line. I've got a seal inconsistency on car. Static tore through the speaker. Wind interference. He tried again. Nothing but broken noise. Cole exhaled slowly. Procedure said to wait for confirmation. Instinct said waiting was a mistake. He unlocked the secondary latch with stiff fingers, the metal biting cold even through gloves. The mechanism resisted, then gave with a dull clack. He pulled. The door slid open. Cold exploded outward like a living thing, a blade of air so sharp it stole his breath. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dark interior. And Cole froze. Inside the car, 13 German shepherds lay bound. Rope circled their legs. Thick silver duct tape sealed their muzzles. Their bodies were pressed close, fur matted with frost, sides heaving in shallow, panicked breaths. Eyes reflected light, some wide and glassy, some dull with exhaustion. One dog lay on her side, chest barely rising, limbs stiff. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that sight. Then Cole moved. He climbed into the car, boots crunching against ice, voice low and steady despite the surge of adrenaline. Easy, easy. You're okay. Rook positioned himself at the threshold, blocking the open door, body angled outward, head high. He wasn't pacing, he wasn't barking. He was holding the line, regulating space like a sentry who knew chaos could kill. Cole knelt beside the nearest dog, fingers already working. He peeled the tape back carefully, slow enough to avoid tearing skin. The dog's tongue was bluish at the edges. Breathing was weak, rapid. Air first, Cole murmured to himself. He freed one muzzle, then another, prioritizing those with the shallowest breaths. He cut rope with a utility blade, one loop at a time, controlling movement so the dogs didn't surge in panic. When one tried to stand and collapsed, Cole guided him down gently, palm firm against the chest. He worked methodically, the way he had under pressure before. Assess, act, reassess. From his pack he pulled emergency thermal blankets, thin, crinkling sheets designed to trap heat. He wrapped them around trembling bodies, layered cardboard beneath to insulate from the steel floor. Chemical warming packs followed, activated and placed along the flanks, under armpits, near groins. Core first. "Stay with me," he said softly, more prayer than command. As he reached the dog lying on her side, he paused. She was smaller than the others, frame lean, ribs too visible beneath her coat. Around her neck, beneath the rope burn, was an old circular scar. Smooth, healed. Faded ink marked the skin nearby, almost gone with time. A training mark. Cole swallowed. For a moment, memory surged unbidden. Dust and heat instead of snow, a different shepherd dragging him by the sleeve while rounds cracked overhead, another dog refusing to leave a wounded handler behind. He pushed the thought away and focused. He freed her muzzle, checked her airway, pressed his ear to her chest. A heartbeat fluttered there. Weak, but present. Rook shifted at the door, tail low, eyes tracking every movement in the yard beyond. He didn't come inside. He didn't need to. When the last rope fell away, Cole backed out of the car, breath ragged, fingers numb. He looked back at the scraped metal near the doorframe. The car number had been ground down, not damaged by accident, not weathered. Removed. Deliberately. Cole stared at it for a long second, the storm roaring around him, the weight of 13 lives pressing heavy on his chest. If he reported this wrong, stepped outside protocol. He could lose the job that kept him afloat. If he didn't report it at all, these dogs would vanish again. Quietly. Permanently. Behind him, one of the shepherds let out a faint, newly freed breath. Cole squared his shoulders. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed, and some orders were older than any rulebook. Morning crept into Iron Hollow without warmth or color. The storm had not loosened its grip. It had merely changed rhythm. Snow still fell in steady sheets, driven sideways by a wind that scoured the rail yard, clean of footprints almost as soon as they formed. Floodlights buzzed weakly against the gray sky, their glow dulled by ice crusting the lenses. Inside a converted loading bay, Cole Ryder stood with his jacket unzipped, sleeves rolled, breath steady despite the cold that lingered even indoors. The space had been cleared overnight and turned into a temporary isolation area. Pallets formed windbreaks, tarps hung from hooks to trap heat. Industrial heaters hummed, pushing out air that smelled faintly of metal and dust. 13 German shepherds lay spread across layered cardboard and blankets, each separated just enough to prevent crowding. Cole moved among them in a slow circuit, eyes trained on small details. Ears, gums, chests rising and falling. He knelt, pressed 2 fingers gently against a dog's inner thigh, counted heartbeats. Another received a few careful sips of warmed water from a squeeze bottle, the liquid dribbling slowly to avoid shock. "Easy," Cole murmured, voice low and even. "That's it." The dogs responded not with panic, but with fragile attention. Some lifted their heads weakly. Others only shifted their eyes. They were exhausted, cold, and confused, but alive. 2 warehouse workers had stayed on despite the storm. Miguel Torres, broad-shouldered with a salt-and-pepper beard and a permanently creased brow, handled logistics with quiet competence. He had worked the yard for 25 years and knew when not to ask questions. Evan Pike, younger and lankier, moved heaters and fetched supplies with restless energy, his concern plain in the way he kept glancing back at the dogs. Miguel crouched beside Cole. "Heaters are stable, temps holding." "Good," Cole said. "If it drops, move the barriers closer." They worked like that until the sound of tires crunching over packed snow cut through the bay. A pickup truck rolled in, dark green and dusted white, engine ticking as it cooled. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out, pulling her collar higher against the wind. Dr. Hannah Moore moved with purpose. She was in her late 30s, average height, with a wiry strength that came from long hours on her feet. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical knot beneath a knit cap, a few loose strands already damp with melting snow. She wore insulated boots, weathered jeans, and a heavy parka that bore old scuffs and faint stains, marks of real work. Her face was sharp but not severe, eyes alert and observant, the kind that noticed tremors in hands and hesitation in voices. She carried 2 cases and a canvas medical bag slung over one shoulder. "Which one called it in?" she asked, voice calm, controlled. Cole stepped forward. "I did." Hannah's gaze flicked to him, measuring. His posture, the way he positioned himself between her and the dogs without meaning to. She noted it, filed it away. She set her cases down and moved immediately to the nearest shepherd, kneeling without ceremony. From her bag came a digital thermometer, gloves, a compact pulse oximeter modified for animals. She worked quickly but gently, murmuring reassurance as she checked each dog in turn. "These bindings," she said after a few minutes, touching a swollen joint with practiced fingers. They were tight, long enough to cause inflammation, some nerve compression too. Cole watched her hands. "They'll recover?" "Most of them," she said. "With time." She shifted to another dog, lifting a paw. Beneath the fur, the skin was roughened, calloused. "Harness wear, not from a pet leash. This is duty-grade friction." Her eyes lifted to Cole again. This time there was a question there. She didn't voice it. She continued her assessment, pausing longer at two dogs whose reactions lagged. Their pupils were sluggish, blinks delayed. "See that?" she said quietly. Mild sedation, not enough to knock them out completely, enough to slow them down, keep them compliant. Miguel swore under his breath. Hannah straightened and pulled off her gloves. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Cole nodded once. Hannah moved to the smallest dog, the female lying closest to the heaters. Her breathing was steadier now, but shallow. Hannah adjusted the blankets, then nodded toward the space. "She stays here," she said. "Closest to the heat. Priority?" Rook had already settled beside her, his body pressed against her flank, warmth shared without prompting. He barely glanced up as Hannah approached, but he didn't move. Hannah paused, studied him. "That's unusual," she said softly. "He doesn't do that often," Cole replied. Their eyes met briefly. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or caution. While Hannah continued treatment, administering anti-shock medication, setting up a small oxygen flow for one of the weaker dogs, Cole stepped away toward the office trailer that housed the yard's access terminals. Inside, the heater rattled noisily. Cole logged in with his credentials, fingers moving faster now. He pulled up rail manifests, timestamps, routing histories. The refrigerated car appeared in the system as if it had materialized overnight. No arrival scan. No yard assignment. Just a placeholder entry with a generic origin code and a destination field left blank. He cross-checked older records. Similar anomalies surfaced. Cars logged briefly, then cleared without departure scans. A knock at the door made him turn. Frank Delaney stood there, shoulders hunched in a worn wool coat, eyes sharp despite his age. Frank had retired from yard operations years ago, but still came in during storms, unofficially watching over the place. His hands were scarred, knuckles thickened by decades of work. "Word travels," Frank said quietly. "Even in weather like this." Cole hesitated, then nodded. "You've seen things like this before?" Frank didn't answer immediately. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "There have been cars that don't belong," he said at last. "Show up, sit a while, then disappear. Folks chalk it up to paperwork errors. I don't." "How many?" Cole asked. Frank shrugged. "Enough?" Cole leaned back, jaw tightening. The pieces aligned too cleanly now. When he returned to the bay, Hannah was finishing her initial round. She wiped her hands, fatigue edging into her posture now that the worst had passed. "These dogs didn't end up here by accident," she said. "This wasn't neglect, it was transport." "Through the yard," Cole replied. "As cover." Hannah studied him. "You've thought about this?" "I've seen patterns before," he said simply. She looked at him a long moment, eyes narrowing not in suspicion, but in assessment. "You move like military," she said. "Check corners. Stand where you can see exits." Cole didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. Hannah nodded once, as if that was answer enough. They stood there, heaters humming, wind howling beyond the walls, 13 lives breathing softly between them. "If you report this immediately," Hannah said carefully, "these dogs will be processed, split up. Some may never be traced back to where they belong." "And if I don't," Cole said, "someone may come back for them." "Yes." Silence settled, heavy and deliberate. Rook shifted slightly, pressing closer to the female dog. She stirred, then stilled again, warmth anchoring her. Cole felt the familiar weight of decision settle in his chest, the same weight he had carried in other places, other times, when every option came with a cost. Outside, the storm showed no sign of easing. Inside the bay, Cole Ryder stood between what was safe on paper and what was right in practice, knowing that whichever path he chose, nothing would remain simple. Snow fell harder as night reclaimed Iron Hollow rail yard, thick flakes spiraling under floodlights that buzzed like tired insects. The storm muffled sound, softened distance, and turned every shape into a question mark. Cole Ryder noticed the change not because anything obvious happened, but because too many things felt almost normal. A dark SUV had been parked near the perimeter fence for nearly an hour, engine idling just enough to keep from freezing. A man in a logistics jacket lingered too close to the warming bay, hands buried in pockets, eyes drifting more often toward the tarped entrance than toward his phone. Another worker. One Cole didn't recognize. Asked twice about damaged freight and which supervisor approved overnight holds. None of it crossed a line. All of it brushed against one. Cole adjusted his stance, letting his reflection blend into the shadow of a container stack. Years ago, he had learned to read patterns the way others read headlines. The problem wasn't any single detail, it was the way they aligned. Rook felt it too. The German shepherd stayed close, head low, ears rotating with small, precise movements. He didn't bark, he didn't pull. His body remained loose but ready, a coiled calm that only appeared when something unseen moved nearby. Hannah Moore emerged from the warming bay, tugging her gloves on. Her face looked tired under the harsh light, but her eyes were clear. She followed Cole's gaze without asking. "You're seeing it too," she said quietly. Cole nodded once. "They're watching." Hannah exhaled, breath fogging. "I was hoping we were wrong." The storm thickened as the yard emptied. By midnight, only essential lights remained on, and the number of people on site dropped to a skeleton crew. The heaters hummed steadily inside the bay, keeping the dogs alive and calm. Then everything went dark. The power cut was total. Lights snapped off. Heaters fell silent. The sudden quiet pressed down like a held breath. Cole moved instantly. "Flashlights," he said, already pulling one free. "Backup radio." Rook's low growl vibrated once, sharp and controlled. Cole sealed the bay doors, sliding heavy bars into place, then moved along the perimeter, checking locks by touch, alone. Hannah joined him, her own flashlight cutting clean lines through the dark. "The timing's wrong," she said. "Grid failures don't choose their moments." Cole nodded. This one did. He knelt near the door to the dogs, voice calm and steady as he spoke to them. Panic spread fast in the cold. Calm spread faster, if handled right. He organized them quickly, efficiently. The weakest were guided toward the center, closest to the remaining heat trapped beneath layered tarps. The stronger dogs formed an outer ring, bodies positioned to block drafts and movement. Rook took point without command, standing where the wind would break first. Cole mapped the exit in his head. Container Row C formed a natural corridor, metal walls shielding wind. At the far end, the maintenance building sat low and squat, its generator independent from the main grid. If they had to move, that was the route. Hannah crouched beside the smallest female shepherd, checking her breathing by feel. "She's stable," she said. "Cold, but holding." "Good," Cole replied. "If we move, she goes first." They hadn't taken 3 steps when Hannah stopped short. "Cole." She pointed toward the electrical room door across the yard. The lock hung crooked, metal scarred near the seam. Cole examined it closely. The damage was clean, precise. "That wasn't forced," Hannah said. "That was picked, or cut." "Which means," Cole replied, "someone knew exactly where to go." They shared a look, the kind forged under pressure rather than trust. Whatever this was, it wasn't random, and it wasn't over. They moved deeper into the shadows between freight cars. Snow filled in their footprints almost instantly. Rook walked ahead, nose low, body loose but alert. Once he stopped abruptly, issuing a single warning growl. Cole followed his gaze and spotted it. a narrow gap between two cars, just wide enough for a man to slip through. Fresh boot prints marred the snow there, edges still sharp. Cole altered course without comment. The path they'd been on would have led them straight into that gap. Rook resumed walking. Hannah watched the dog with a mixture of respect and awe. "He's not guessing," she said. "No," Cole answered. "He's remembering." They reached the maintenance building without incident. Inside, the air smelled of oil and rust, but the generator rumbled steadily. Cole secured the door, then checked the interior corners, movements automatic. As they worked, Hannah pulled something from the inside pocket of her parka. It was a small, worn identification card, edges frayed, the emblem faded, but unmistakable to those who knew how to look. She hesitated, then held it out. "I don't carry this anymore," she said. "Not officially." Cole studied the card without touching it. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Army Medical," he said. Hannah nodded. "Combat support. I patched people up where I could. Lost my husband on one of those deployments." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Cole's silence deepened, but it wasn't empty. It was weighted. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "So am I," Hannah replied. "That's why I came here. Thought I could live lighter. Help animals. Stay out of the dark." Her gaze drifted back toward the yard, where the storm erased everything equally. "Seems the dark has a way of finding you anyway." Cole understood that better than he wanted to admit. While checking the floor near the electrical room entrance, his flashlight caught a glint. He crouched and picked it up carefully. A strip of silver duct tape. Not ordinary. The surface bore faint industrial markings, nearly invisible unless you knew to look. Manufacturing codes used in international shipping, the kind ordered in bulk for freight, not hardware stores. Cole closed his fist around it. This wasn't improvised. It was supplied. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling steel against steel. Somewhere beyond the yard, engines hummed briefly, then faded. Cole stood, shoulders squared, eyes steady. The circle was tightening, and whatever had begun in the cold steel belly of a freight car was no longer content to stay hidden. The storm returned with intent. Snow thickened into heavy curtains, wind driving it low across Iron Hollow rail yard until the world narrowed to steel silhouettes and moving white. Sound carried strangely, muted where it should echo, sharp where it shouldn't exist at all. Somewhere beyond the perimeter fence, engines idled and cut, timed with patience rather than urgency. Cole Ryder felt it in his chest before he saw it. Movement, not the clumsy rush of thieves or the careless steps of desperate men. This was controlled, measured. Shapes peeled away from darkness and rejoined it, using the storm as cover the way trained hands used smoke. They were back. Cole did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. He placed a hand on Rook's shoulder. The German shepherd stiffened, then flowed forward, silent as drifting ash. Behind them, the maintenance building glowed faintly. Generator steady, heat holding. 13 lives waited inside. "Time to move," Cole said quietly. He opened the maintenance door just long enough to signal, then closed it again, sealing the heat in. The dogs responded not with panic, but with attention. Rook took the lead, body low, head turning just enough to guide. The strongest shepherds shifted outward instinctively, forming a loose-moving barrier. The weakest were shepherded inward, steps slowed to match theirs. Cole moved pallets with practiced efficiency, dragging them into position to narrow access lanes. He locked sliding doors in sequence, not to block entirely, but to funnel movement. Steel groaned, chains rattled. The yard became a maze where only one path made sense. And it wasn't obvious. A forklift sat idle near container row C. Cole climbed into the cab, powered it on, and swung the headlights wide. The beams cut through snow like blades, flooding the corridor with blinding white. He hit the horn once, long and shrill. Metal echoed. Somewhere in the yard, someone cursed softly. He cut the engine, and darkness swallowed the sound again. Footsteps approached. Slow, intentional. Cole glimpsed them through gaps between containers. 3 figures at first, then more. Heavy coats, faces obscured. One man moved differently from the others, shoulders squared, steps economical, hands signaling rather than gesturing. Cole's jaw tightened. Military. Not a soldier, perhaps, but taught by one. They split, attempting to flank. Cole adjusted, shifting a pallet, forcing them back into the corridor. Snow crunched under boots. A flashlight flicked on briefly, then off. Inside the maintenance building, Hannah Moore knelt beside the smallest female shepherd. The dog shivered despite the heat, eyes half-lidded. Hannah's hands were steady as she drew a syringe, administered a measured dose of anti-shock medication, then wrapped another thermal layer around the dog's torso. "You're okay," Hannah murmured, voice low and firm. "Stay with me." She glanced toward the door, listening. Every instinct screamed to leave, to hide, to shrink away from the violence gathering outside. She didn't. She checked the emergency device clipped beneath her jacket. A compact transmitter, scarred and utilitarian. She had powered it on earlier, fingers moving with muscle memory she hadn't used in years. She pressed the activation sequence now, holding it steady until the indicator blinked. Signal sent. Outside, Rook halted abruptly. One of the shepherds slipped on ice, legs skidding out from beneath him. The dog yelped softly, panic flaring. Cole was already turning. He could see the opening ahead, the next pallet, the last turn before cover. He could also see the dog struggling, claws scraping uselessly against steel. Behind him, footsteps closed in. Cole didn't hesitate. He crossed back, crouched low, and lifted the shepherd's front end, steadying him until his footing returned. The dog pressed briefly against Cole's leg, breath ragged, then found balance. They moved again. A beam of light swept across the snow where they had been moments earlier. Too late. The first confrontation came without words. A man stepped into the corridor, weapon raised low, but ready. Cole drove the forklift forward just enough to force him back, then killed the lights again. The man retreated, slipping into shadow, not firing, not shouting. They weren't here to make noise. They were here to reclaim cargo. Rook issued a single sharp bark, not attack, but command. The dogs froze, bodies pressed close to the wall, breathing shallow. It was discipline born not of fear, but training. Cole felt a grim satisfaction at that. Hannah reached the doorway of the maintenance building just as Cole backed in, sealing it behind him. The generator hummed, oblivious to the violence inches away. "They're disciplined," Cole said quietly. "Not scavengers." Hannah nodded. "I know." Outside, the storm howled louder, rattling loose metal, masking movement. A shadow passed the narrow window, then another. Someone tested the door. Once, twice. Cole braced. Then, from far beyond the yard, a sound cut through the wind. Faint, but unmistakable. Rotors. Not close. Not yet. Hannah closed her eyes briefly, relief and fear colliding in her chest. The men outside heard it too. The testing stopped. Movement shifted. A voice murmured something sharp and clipped. Another answered, frustrated. Cole peeked through the window slit. The man with military movement raised his hand, signaling retreat. Not panic. Calculation. They melted back into the storm the way they had come. Silence returned slowly, the kind that rang in the ears. Cole didn't move for a long moment. Neither did Rook. When he finally straightened, his shoulders ached, not from exertion, but from the weight of choices made and lives held together by seconds. Hannah knelt again beside the female shepherd, checking vitals. The dog's breathing was steadier now. Her eyes opened briefly, meeting Hannah's. "You did good," Hannah whispered. Cole leaned against the wall, exhaustion threading through his bones. He met Hannah's gaze across the room. No words passed between them, but something settled. An understanding forged under pressure. The storm raged on outside. Inside, 13 dogs lay breathing, warm, alive. And somewhere beyond the yard, the men who had come for them recalculated. Dawn arrived quietly over Iron Hollow, pale and restrained, as if the storm itself were reluctant to let go. Snow still clung to rail ties and steel roofs, but the wind had softened, carrying the distant hum of engines that did not belong to freight. Red and blue lights broke the gray, reflecting off frozen metal in steady pulses. Federal vehicles rolled into the yard in a disciplined arc, tires crunching over packed snow. Men and women stepped out with purpose. Dark parkas marked with agency insignia, radios clipped high, movements precise but unhurried. At their center walked Special Agent Marcus Hale, a tall man in his 40s with a square jaw and iron-gray hair cropped close. His eyes were alert, assessing, missing nothing. Years of investigations had taught him patience, and tonight had confirmed it. Cole Ryder met them near the maintenance building, shoulders squared, breath steady. He spoke only when asked, and when he did, his words were exact. Evidence moved from hand to hand. The altered rail logs, photographs of reworked seals, the distinctive silver tape with its industrial markings, vials containing trace sedatives, and the compact bolt cutters recovered near the electrical room. Each item told part of a story that no longer needed speculation. Hale nodded once as he listened. "They came to reclaim," he said. "That's when they make mistakes." The arrests followed swiftly. 2 vehicles were intercepted along the access road, their occupants pulled from the snow with quiet authority. Others were taken inside the yard, caught between barriers that had been laid with intention. There were no shouts, no dramatic resistance. Only the dull acceptance of men who understood the ledger had turned against them. Inside the maintenance building, warmth held steady. Dr. Hannah Moore stood with her sleeves rolled, documenting injuries with practiced care. Her face bore the fatigue of long hours, but her eyes were clear. She presented her findings calmly to the agents: compression injuries consistent with prolonged restraint, harness wear indicating prior duty training, and chemical traces supporting mild sedation. Her credentials spoke for themselves. Veterinary medicine reinforced by combat medical experience, precise and unflinching. "These animals were not abandoned," she said. "They were transported." Her statement changed the tone of the room. Procedures shifted. What might have been seized became protected. What could have been dispersed became preserved. The 13 German Shepherds were transferred under supervision to heated transport units, each dog monitored and logged. Blankets were adjusted, fluids administered, temperatures recorded. Rook watched from the threshold, posture calm, eyes tracking every movement, until Hannah knelt and pressed a reassuring hand to his shoulder. He stayed. Over the following days, Iron Hollow transformed. What had been a steel yard became a corridor of recovery. Kennels were set up with space and light. Veterinarians rotated through assessments. Paperwork traced histories, microchips, training registries, faded tattoos that linked dogs to units and handlers long thought lost. Calls were made, messages returned. Some reunions were immediate. A former handler arrived with hands that shook as he knelt, voice breaking at the sight of a dog he had mourned years earlier. Other stories were quieter. Dogs whose paths had ended abruptly, whose futures now required reinvention. Hannah guided those transitions with care. She oversaw rehabilitation plans, pairing physical therapy with behavioral work, ensuring each dog's next step honored what they had been trained to give. Several were slated for service again, their skills intact and their spirits resilient. Others were designated for therapeutic roles, their steadiness suited to veterans carrying wounds that did not show on scans. The smallest female shepherd progressed steadily. Her breathing strengthened. Her eyes grew brighter. One morning she stood unassisted, tail lifting in a tentative arc as sunlight filtered through a frost-rimmed window. Hannah smiled despite herself. "She needs a name," Hannah said later, watching the dog press her nose to the glass. Cole considered it, then nodded. "We'll give her one that stays." They called her Ember. The name fit. Quiet heat, endurance. As the case concluded, Special Agent Hale returned to the yard with final documentation. He spoke with Cole privately, his tone measured. "You did more than hold the line," he said. "You changed the outcome." Cole accepted the words without ceremony. Recognition had never been his currency. Purpose was. When the last transport departed and the lights dimmed, Iron Hollow felt different, not healed. Places like that carried their history, but altered. The maintenance building, once a shelter against cold, now housed something more permanent. Kennels lined one wall. Therapy mats lay stacked neatly. A whiteboard listed schedules and names. Cole remained. He signed on officially to manage the space, coordinating with local rescues and federal programs. Hannah stayed too, expanding her practice to include trauma recovery for working dogs and the people who depended on them. Together, they built a small center where steel had once swallowed breath and gave it a function that answered to need rather than profit. Veterans came. Some spoke easily, others sat in silence, hands resting on warm fur, eyes closed as if relearning a language they had forgotten. Ember lay among them often, head on a knee, eyes half-lidded, presence steady. Hannah found her own healing in the work. The ache that had driven her away from the field softened as she watched lives reconnect. Loss did not vanish, but it no longer defined her path. She taught again, mentored, and trusted herself to stand where care met danger without retreating. Cole discovered something quieter and deeper than closure. He learned the rhythm of days shaped by service rather than orders, by responsibility rather than deployment. He learned that building could be as demanding as defending, and just as worthy. On a clear afternoon, the dogs were walked outside together. Snow glittered under a thin winter sun. No ropes, no tape, only leashes held loosely, then not at all. They stepped forward as a group, breath visible, tails moving in easy arcs. Rook stood at their center, watchful and calm. Ember trotted a few steps ahead, paused, then looked back as if counting. Everyone was there. The yard was quiet, not empty. Quiet in the way places become when they have finally been heard. This story is a reminder that courage doesn't always roar on a battlefield. Sometimes it shows up quietly, when someone chooses to stop, to notice, to care, while everyone else looks away. In everyday life, we may not face blizzards or criminals in the dark, but we are constantly given chances to protect what is vulnerable, to speak when silence feels easier, and to stand by those who have been treated as disposable. Every small act of responsibility, every moment of compassion has the power to change a life. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what part stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories about loyalty, second chances, and choosing what's right, subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking through these moments together. No one should ever be left behind.